Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube, and I'm coming to you from the Good Days, which is my commercial recording facility here in Miami, Florida. So if you happen to be in Miami and you want to come check it out, hit me up on IG. I'd love to set up a little tour for you. And speaking of IG, if you happen to be on Instagram, I would love it if you follow at the Good Days 305, which is the Instagram account for my studio. So, okay, here on this channel, a lot of the times I like to discuss things like the philosophy of mixing and recording and some more esoteric concepts like how to present a more musical experience for the end listener. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to slam the shit out of 808s, because sometimes we just want an 808 to hit hard. So let's talk about that. All right, let's pop on over in here and just kind of play what we've got. Okay, so it's a cool little beat. One of the things that I want to say right off the bat, in terms of getting 808s to hit hard, there is really nothing better than having room in the arrangement for the 808 to hit hard. In this particular case, there is nothing occupying the low end except for the 808, and there's really not even a lot in the low mids. Really, we don't get any energy until we get into that more central mid area with the piano and that vocal chop. So if we have a lot of room, that means we can really make the 808s hit. And one of the techniques that I use that really cannot be understated, and I think is a good one to start things off with, is just turning the 808 up. Sometimes we do not have to overthink things, and I'd say maybe about half of the time or a little less, that is what I do with 808s. Like, it's really not a magic trick. However, it wouldn't be much of a video if I just stopped there and was like, okay, this is what we do. I want to show you a few different approaches in terms of getting 808s to hit harder or be heavier, and why to use those particular approaches. So the first one I want to start with is going to be the most fun, I think, and that is using distortion. And when I'm talking about distortion, I'm not talking about overt distortion, like it sounds like you're putting the 808 through a guitar amp, although that could sound really cool. In this particular case, I'm talking about a subtler distortion that we oftentimes call saturation. So I want to show you a cheat code saturator of mine. This one's kind of subtle. It took me a while to find and some fun experimentation here, but the Eventide harmonizer has a line input button right here, which applies a saturation, and it's really cool sounding, and genuinely, that is what's doing most of the work here. So I'm going to give you the before and after. The reason why I like this is because it retains the quality of the 808 for the most part. It just adds some subtle but noticeable, very analog sounding overtones. If we hear it in solo, it's pretty obvious. And we can then create some slight variations of that in order to thicken things up a little bit more if we want to. So this is just my heavy bass preset, and basically it's just really utilizing the line in function. There's like a little bit more stuff going on, but that stuff makes almost no difference. I'll show you a different one here. This is my Fatty 808 preset here, where there's a little bit of like chorusing going on. It's a pretty cool sound. This is really good if we want a wide low end. A lot of the times we talk about keeping our low end in mono. Personally, while there is some merit to that, there is also merit to creating a more stereoized low end as well. They are not exclusive from each other, and I know that somebody in the comments section is going to be jumping in like, oh, well, you should always have your low end in mono. Not really. There are merits, like I said, but sometimes a little stereo effect in the low end actually works really nicely. And in this record, I might even consider using this one. It sounds really good. Another saturator that I like, and this one can get into the world of distortion, is going to be our Gorilla Drive from Safari Pedal. This one's going to be a little bit more obvious. So it's one of those where if we can get away with it and it works for the record, we can use it. But if not, then we just probably shouldn't. So before and after. So I think this one's a little bit more obvious. In this particular case, because we don't have any competing elements in the low end, so we need that 808 to really stand up in the actual speakers, I think that this is a really, really good choice for this particular beat, and this is probably what I would actually go with here, mixing this. And just for funsies, I've taken the IK Multimedia tape plugin, the Tape Machine 80, and I'm just basically slamming the living crud out of it. So again, it's a subtler thing, but it's a nice color. It's a saturation that helps things feel a little bit more full. Used in subtlety, this is a really, really effective technique, and depending on which one we want to go with, like if there's already a good amount of saturation in the 808, but it still just feels like it's a little flat, I like the harmonizer line input. If it needs, like if the 808 just needs something there, it needs more color, I like the Gorilla Drive, and if we want to kind of split the difference between the two, the IK Multimedia Tape 80 works really well. I'm also going to interject real quick because I feel like this comes up almost every video that I do, but in this particular case, none of these companies are companies that I endorse or companies that have paid me to make this video. So this is just what I'm using. I do have endorsement deals with companies. There are companies that pay me to make videos. I can tell you assuredly, I am not making any videos for anything that I do not love. That's just not how I do it. It's not worth it. So in this particular case, though, yeah, nobody's paying me to say any of this stuff, and I barely have relationships with some of these companies, actually. So 808, going on to a different technique here, the attack of the 808. So sometimes we need our 808 to punch heavier. A lot of the times 808s can be very round sounds. If we don't have a layered kick drum to give it that punch that it needs, then we might need to invent a little bit of punch ourselves. Now, layering a kick drum is a perfectly valid technique, incidentally. However, there are many times where we don't want to layer a kick drum because it's going to change the production too much or in a way that isn't appropriate for the genre. So the simplest and most straightforward technique for getting more punch into a source is actually using compression, which is a little counterintuitive because we normally think of compression as something that we use to reduce the attack of something. It squeezes the dynamic range, so by nature, it's going to reduce punch. However, if we set it correctly, it will actually do the opposite, and the formula for getting more punch out of something is to dig a little bit lower with the threshold so that we are affecting more of the overall signal, but use a very slow attack time. And here you can see I've set my attack almost as high as the bar goes. It's at 227. And what that's going to do is cause the compressor to react slowly enough where a lot of the attack of our source is going to come through. But because the threshold is low enough, it's going to reduce energy on the sustain. So in other words, we're kind of turning the sustain down. Conversely, we are turning the attack up. Let's play a before and after. I think that's really cool, right? It gives it just a little bit more oomph on the attack. Now, another way we can do this is by using a transient designer here. So I've got the Joey Sturgis Tones Transify, and I am going to bump up some of the stuff that's under 100 hertz. And for fun, I'm going to also bump up some of the stuff that's up in the upper mid-range because there's a little bit of something there. And obviously, I've turned it quite a bit because there's not a lot there, but this is going to give us a more defined attack. It's not only going to give us more physical energy like the compressor did, it's also going to give us a little bit more clarity on that physical energy, meaning it's going to give us a more defined and sharp sound. So let's do a before and after. Personally, I love that. I'm a big fan of how that sounds. I have this thing with like physical low end. Not every mixer is this way, but I need to feel a physical punch from the low end. Like I want it to actually like move the airwaves at me, not just be there, be present and be full, but actually physically be moving the speaker. So I use these techniques pretty frequently. Where we really want to emphasize using an enhanced attack is if the 808 is a key rhythm driver. Really anything that's a key rhythm driver, we want to have the attack to be clarified. I'd say like 66% of the time, 75% of the time. Where we don't want to use this is when we need to fill up space and make something fatter because it's working in the opposite direction. It's taking away body in order to add punch. Whereas in the next examples that I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you the converse, where we're filling up space by adding sustain and conversely taking away punch, right? So if we need to fill up space, we don't use this technique. If we want to emphasize rhythm and we need more physicality, this is a great technique to use. All right, the last one that I want to show you, and this is a really, really powerful one, and one that I think people forget about completely very often, is volume automation. So we have digital audio workstations at our fingertips. We can literally go in and we can shape the sound ourselves manually. So I'm going to do that with a trim plugin here, and I'll pull up my automation on the trim plugin. So this is just adding level, and what I'm doing is I'm raising up the very front of the signal right here, where this is fading in mostly. So what's happening is this is getting emphasized a little bit more in the very, very front, and then pulling up a little bit of this transient area right here. So it's not only going to add more punch, it's going to add more punch a little earlier than our compressor and our transient designer, which I think is kind of cool, right? It allows us to shape things the way we want. Could I like delay this a little bit, like have this fade in more so that we're emphasizing just the really punchy part? Yeah, we could, but I like kind of being ahead of it so that we're getting more upfront signal entirely. And it's just not something we could replicate any other way. And that sounds like this. Let's do the before and after. The cool thing about this is it changes the sound, like the actual tone and texture of the sound, the least. So if we really love the way something sounds, but we just want it to hit a little bit harder, this is like flawless victory, right? We do not lose anything. There are no trade-offs. We just have something that hits harder. And this is a technique that I use quite a bit, actually. So never ever underestimate the power of just volume automation, because sometimes it is the best. All right, let's look at the other side of this coin now. Sometimes in order to get our 808 to hit harder, what we really mean is we want it to be heavier or take up more space. If that's what we're trying to do, what we want to do is raise up the sustain, the tailing part of the body. So I'm going to show you how we can do that. This is with the Waves MV2. I'll give you the before and after, and then I'll show you how to set this up, because it's a little trickier than how it looks at first glance. All right, before. I like the Waves MV2 because of how we can use it and also the color that it brings to the table. It's got like a very distinct but very evenly dispersed saturating quality to it. So it brings in a little bit of that saturation effect, but it also brings in a lot of that sustain effect. Now, how do we set this up? So the way we set this up is first with this low-level slider. Basically, this is an upward compressor. So it's going to take a low-level signal and start turning the quiet stuff up. I like to turn this up until I start hearing audible distortion. And incidentally, if we like the distortion, we don't have to stop at the distortion. Like, this distortion actually sounds nice, but if we wanted to do it in a cleaner way, I'd probably back it off a little bit to like maybe around somewhere 10 to 12 dB up. Then I take the high level, which is going to squeeze the transients, the attack of the sound down. It's going to reduce attack, right? It's the opposite of what we were doing before. But the key to it is to group it with the output level, because this has an automatic gain compensation. So if we turn the output and the high level down at the same time, we keep things in unity, and that's going to allow us to get the squash that we want. And then we can simply do some gain compensation in order to bring back some of the level we lose here. So before. After. Maybe we actually gained a little bit of level overall. There we go. So really, really cool technique, and one that I use pretty often. I use it on all sorts of bass elements. I use it on synth basses. I use it on bass guitar, just because it has a really nice color to it as well. Okay, so this is the Music Hack master plan, or not master plan, Music Hack Fuel. So Fuel is kind of Master Plan, which is a mastering plugin redesigned for individual tracks. It's very, very cool on low end because it incorporates a lot of the stuff that we did already. In addition to all of the dynamic controls that we get, which shows up on like the comp, the thick, and the loud controls here, it also is going to add some saturation and color and things like that. And it's just very good for kicking life into something, making things feel fuller, giving it a little bit more of that analog color, all that kind of stuff. So before and after. And as far as like the most overt differences, I'd say this is probably giving us the most because it's allowing us to do the most. So really, really cool plugin right here for that. And I would say I use this maybe one in every 4 or 5 records. I use it pretty often on 808s, actually, when I'm actually doing something to the 808. It's pretty good. Now, in this particular circumstance, I would say that getting more body into the 808, this last technique that I'm doing here, is probably going to be the best for this record. Why? Because we have a ton of open space, right? So the fuller and more bodied the 808 can sound, the heavier it's going to be, the harder it's going to feel. That's what we can go for here. If we had more things going on in the low mids and low end, I might not opt for that, right? So it's not about knowing these techniques. Knowing these techniques is important. But now that you've seen this video, you already know these techniques, right? We can add distortion, we can add attack, or we can add body. Those are our 3 approaches. But what's going to make you a good engineer or a good producer is knowing when to use those. So what you need to do is you need to experiment with these ideas, maybe use plugins of your own that you particularly like, try different things out, find the things that you like, and find the times in which you like to use them. And through your decision making, that's ultimately what's going to make you good at getting 808s to really hit. It's not about the technique, it's about knowing when and how to implement it. Last one that I might want to show here is going to be something that I saw Mike Dean say, that he likes to take a pull tech and turn the low band to the lowest setting. I'm not using the lowest setting here because I didn't feel like it was working very effectively, but I think he said he puts it on like 20 hertz or something like that, and he just turns it all the way up. When I heard him say this, I had 2 thoughts. My first thought was, aren't we really just turning the 808 up? Right? Like an 808 is basically a low frequency sine wave. So if we're EQing up a bunch of low end, we're really just turning the signal louder, right? For the most part. But then the other thought I had was, this is a guy who's got countless hit records behind what he's saying, what he's done. So maybe instead of like applying my own pre-bias to what he's saying, maybe I should just try it out and see what happens. That's an important part of this, right? Keeping an open mind and trying things. Now, why do I have this in the sustain section? Well, because the sustain of the 808 is going to be mostly low frequency energy. So this is sort of a roundabout way of turning sustain up. We're boosting the frequencies that are primarily in the later stages of the 808. But this is also going to boost up the attack as well because there is low frequency energy in the attack. So it's going to reshape the signal in general. So let's do it before and after. Let's see how it goes. So this makes the 808 really, really heavy. I don't think it works for this record because it's focusing energy more toward the deep subs. What we need is an 808 that's going to stand up across the entire low frequency range. So we want energy that's in the subs, but we also want energy that's in the primary bass range, some energy that's in the low mid. That's what's going to make our 808 sound big. However, let's say I had a layered kick drum here. By refocusing the energy more into the sub, the 808 would get along with that kick better, because the kick is going to have more energy in the 80 hertz, 100 hertz, 120 hertz range. So now that we have more energy in the 40, 50, 60 hertz range in the 808, we create a separation between the two and allow them to together take up more space. So again, application dependent, always. Does it work here? No. Would I see it working with a layered kick? Absolutely. So wanted to point that out because that's what we are doing here on this channel. We're not just learning the technique, we're learning the technique and the application, right? Okay, let's wrap this up. If you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. If you want to get really in-depth and take your mixing game to the next level, you want to become a Weiss Advice member. So go into that description below, check out the link, which will take you to weissadvice.com. Become a member, sign up, join me for the weekly webinars. Check out all of my video tutorials, get the downloads and supplementary material and trackouts so that you can learn this stuff, put it into practice. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.